Bonjour à tous, ravi d'être avec vous.
Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be with you. I'm Greg Rung. I am the Associate Director of a strategic consultancy, and it's called Oliver Wyman, and we are now going to hear a debate about a positive economy with a roundtable around globalization and a positive economy. So before we start the roundtable, I would like to welcome Mr. Gérard Mestrallet, who is the CEO of GDF Suez.
Bonjour.
Good morning. We are delighted to have you with us here today. You are chairing one of the major corporations for energy on the planet. Could you tell us, as the CEO of GDSF, could you tell us about your opinion about the recommendations that were conveyed in this LH Forum? Thank you. And I would first like to thank Jacques Attali for inviting me to this LH Forum like last year. And I am delighted about the success of this forum. Our company, because of the type of activity it leads and because of its convictions, we share the vision of Jacques Attali, and we are convinced about this positive economy that has to be looked at with a different perspective. I think that this week was a very fruitful week. We have had many debates and proposals have been made to Pierre Moscovici on Tuesday. And of course, many of these proposals have to do with companies and businesses, and especially in the field of energy and the environment. And there is one subject that is very interesting, I believe, that is to say, how can you reconcile our activities with time? Because, of course, you have different time scales. The time scale for the market, which is quite instantaneous. And this is what actually gave rise to so many consequences and serious consequences at the time of the crisis. The timescale of laws, the timescale of mankind, the timescale of businesses and of the industry, which is much longer. And this is us. We have to take account of our shareholders, which represent the market, so we have to reconcile the different time scales. At the level of the industry, we're talking about decades, sometimes even half a century. And for major projects, for example, you can talk about a full century. So, of course, we also have to take account of the time scale of the environment, because we also work with natural resources and the time that is needed for these resources to recover. So we have to reconcile those timescales between in different projects, sustainable projects, environmental projects, and industrial projects, and human projects. And I would like to add here also the fact that we have to think about this positive project here. So I believe that this is quite a challenge for a company manager, i.e. the most important one. And of course, we are dealing with energy and the environment, and this vision impacts us, but it is also a vision that has an impact on citizens. Citizens who act in a responsible way. As citizens and consumers, we have to act for a positive economy. Jacques has called for passion underlying capitalism. And I would like to add to that we should also call for lucidity. We have to be lucid in the way we do that. I mean, if you have a passion and you are a capitalist, it's not in your best interest to have a crisis, of course. Capitalism also suffered from the crisis. After the Lehman crisis, well, this was a disaster also for capitalism. So a passionate capitalism also has to be more responsible, more virtuous, and more efficient. And this on the long term. So I do agree with the 45 proposals that have been developed, but maybe not all individually, but I would like to highlight two of them that I really like. First of all, the proposal for the development of a participative funding system. I believe that this is a very good trigger. Thanks to the internet, it really is a very good way of funding projects. Singers have been able to come up on stage thanks to this, and with Planet Finance, we have funded a project which is Micro World that allows us to fund projects, micro projects, thanks to our employees who actually are members of this system. So they give a little bit of money. You can give 30, 40 euros. We have 1,000 employees at GDF Suez who have actually become a member of this micro-funding participative system. And this is money that is recycled because these are loans, and once they've been reimbursed, well, this money is immediately reinvested. So more and more we could actually envisage to fund major projects with participative funds, and which are based on the solidarity system. Now, the second idea is the public procurement, which should take account of the societal impacts. It's even quite surprising that it's not yet the case, because of course it's in the best interest of the society at large. And if public procurement does not take account of the best interests of the general public, well, of course it would be a problem. So these are the two proposals that have been highlighted and that I would like to support more particularly. Okay, talking about energy, when you talk about a positive economy, you of course have to look at the issue around the protection of the environment. So how do you, as the CEO of a big company in this area, how do you reconciliate the challenges behind a positive economy and what you do on a daily basis? Of course, the challenges are very tough and fast changing. In the field of energy, we are living through an unprecedented revolution. And of course, this has nothing to do with what happens in other countries in the world. There are different parts of the world experiencing these different types of transitions. In the US, they are going through a revolution with non-conventional hydrocarbons and shale gas. On the other side, you have the developing countries, emerging countries, where they have considerable need for energy. By 2030, 90% of the extra needs for energy in the world will be located in emerging countries, that is to say outside Europe, the US, and Australia, which are three areas which will no longer, which will only represent 10% of the extra demand for energy in the future. And also you have the poorest countries with requirements which are far from being met and whom should not be discarded. I believe that access to a sustainable energy for all is a challenge for mankind because we have 1.3 billion individuals who do not have access to electricity and more than 2 billion who still use traditional biomass to cook food, for example, and they contribute to deforestation by doing that. So universal access to energy is a social objective, a major one, and we believe that this is a challenge that can be met. As far as we are concerned, we have committed ourselves in that direction. We have increased our production capacity, and we contribute to support distribution of electricity for millions and millions of Brazilians, and we have created an initiative, GDF Suez Rassembleur d'énergie, that is to say that we support the projects of social entrepreneurs who have started projects aimed at allowing the poorer population to have access to energy. Now, talking about Europe, I would like to say something about Europe, because what we are going through today in Europe is quite preoccupying, quite worrying. In Europe, we have experienced deregulation, decentralization, digitalization, digitalization, convergence between digital technologies and energy technologies, and the last one is decline. So we have 4 Ds here. Decline, because there is a decline in terms of the consumption of energy, in terms of volume, expressed in volume, which can only be something that we could be delighted about. We could reduce our consumption of energy by 50%, and de facto, since 2008, this decline has been a reality. And of course, the crisis has helped because there was a recession, and this, of course, led to less energy being used. But at the same time, we have to take account of the efforts that have been made in order to help energy efficiency and support it. 90,000 people have fully dedicated their efforts to the reduction of the energy consumption. Now, let's talk about the decentralization phenomenon, which is a revolution, really, because it changes the way we relate with energy. Some consumers have chosen to become producers of energy. You can do that by putting up solar panels on your roof and maybe a wind turbine at the end of your backyard, right? But this is a revolution, really, because a few years back from now, people weren't actually interested in the actual source of their energy. I remember a poll that was led in the United States, and people were asked, where does electricity come from? And 50% of the people said from the wall. So, beyond the wall, they didn't know what was happening, right? They didn't know about the source of their electricity, whether it was renewable or not, whether it was nuclear electricity or not, and so forth. So, and now, because they distribute power, consumers can also better understand and know and manage their electricity. So they become involved, and they are no longer passive about it. So for us, as businesses, it's a revolution in Europe. We are really experiencing a revolution. So the old times of monopolies is over, right? And with major power stations and everything, it's over. And we are unavoidably moving towards a system where we will have more small production units with wind farms, solar panels, micro cogeneration, geothermal generation, and so forth and so on. All this is really changing, so it's a new energy system that we have to build in Europe, and it is urgent that we do so. We have to be guided not by generation production, but by the needs and usage of people. Of course, we have to avoid energy precariousness. Now, there is one subject I would like to highlight here, because I really think that Europe is making a big mistake in that respect. Mr. Barnier is not yet here, but I will tell him about this. That is our energy policy, and notably the policies which have an impact on climate. Even though we have the Kyoto Protocol, you know that CO2 emissions in the world carry on going up, but Europe is now acting against its own objectives because of shale gas in the US. Well, then coal becomes cheaper in Europe, and so that means that there is more and more energy generation based on coal in Europe, and so that means that we have more CO2 emissions in France, in Germany, in the UK now. And if we hadn't experienced the crisis, if we hadn't had the recession, well, we wouldn't actually experience that now. One of the consequences, which is not a side effect of this situation, it's just that we are starting up our coal generation plants now, and gas plants, which are very modern, are no longer, there to serve and complement the generation needs. So the problem is, when we talk about Fessenheim, for example, in France, whether or not it should be closed, GDF has closed 8 times the equivalent of Fessenheim in terms of power generation. And, this was not covered by the media at all. But still, we would like to attract the attention of public authorities on this, because we believe that this is a waste at industrial level, because these power plants are modern. They are quite new, only a few years back. They were developed only a few years back, and they were developed because we could actually cover for extra requirements in terms of energy. Now they have been completely discarded from the system. They only generate deficit, and everywhere in Europe we can say that we are closing 30 to 40 times Fessenheim as an equivalent of Fessenheim. And this is something that nobody knows. Gas power plants are being closed, and this is going to have a big impact within the framework of the European energy system. Now, what I did was bring together all the CEOs of energy production and generation companies in Europe to talk about this, brainstorm them, saying that the European energy policy is a failure. The failure in terms of price, because the price of energy is going up in Europe, whereas it's going down in the US. It's a failure in terms of safety of supply, but also a failure in terms of the protection of the environment and climate change. So we would like to attract the attention of European politicians in that respect, because the future of energy in Europe is challenged. Now, one last point I would like to highlight, if I may, is about the energy transition, which is a reality indeed. It is not something that we can choose. We cannot say that we are, in favor or against it. It's just something that happens. It's a fact. We are moving from an old world to a new world in terms of the way we distribute energy. The fact that we decentralized our energy distribution systems. People's relation to energy is going to change. All consumers are going to become actual stakeholders who will have to make responsible choices in terms of the way they choose their energy supply. And so this energy transition is something that has to be a success. This trend is irreversible. And, this is going to happen at different paces, but we have to have a good energy mix based on a sustainable plan, adapted plan that can be funded. We can see what happens in Germany in that respect. And, of course, we have to make sure that we remember about, the energy mix, because electricity represents 22%, and the rest is heating and transportation and the industry. So we would recommend to adopt renewable heating systems, biogas, biomass, and we have just inaugurated a biomass power plant for the heat system of the city of Le Havre. So we're starting to actually build it now. So this energy transition is, of course, not the only subject that has to be tackled within the general framework of a transition. Our societal models, which we have talked and you have talked about for 3 days now, are also a subject that has to be focused on, of course. But energy is an essential service. It is a life-sustaining service, and it is going through a revolution. This sector is absolutely vital for economic development, social development, for competitiveness. And if we are able to succeed, we have to succeed if we want to move forward towards a positive economy. Okay, the data you have just shared are quite worrying indeed. This is new data. I didn't know about that, not in that detail anyway. So we can see that the trends, the macro trends, are quite adverse. And we were talking about the energy transition right now. We talked about a circular economy in this forum, which could be a different way of looking at the problem. And could we maybe talk about this circular economy and what do you think could be the impact, especially in view of the trends that you've just mentioned? Indeed, the circular economy is an emerging or emerged concept which is very important. I think it is a concrete example of the way ecosystems actually function, natural ecosystems that mankind has transformed. So it would be necessary for us to move away from the linear economy to adopt a circular economy. The linear economy is the economy that we have experienced for centuries now. That is to say that we extract resources from the natural environment, which is finite, right? And we have been using these resources and then just discarding them. So that means that this represents a very big waste. Of course, we are living in a finite world. We all know that now. So that's why this linear system is so bad. Now, the circular economy system is based on the use of natural resources, but waste is not just thrown away. Part of it is recycled. For example, glass can be recycled now, iron, steel, or sometimes transformed, processed into a different product, recovered. This is the case for energy. If you look at the water cycle, wastewater is collected, filtered, so the water itself can be reused, and the sludges then can be turned into heat if we burn them, or energy, electricity with an electrical turbine, or we can turn that into gas thanks to methane processes, and that can be reintroduced into the gas network. That is to say that we call that a biogas. For example, this is something that we can do from agricultural waste. We can actually recycle gas and produce gas that is not extracted from the natural resource. I'm sorry, I'm very aware of time. I think that we should keep some time for the debate, so I would just let you conclude. Okay, let me just quote one example of how we can reuse energy. This project is a project aimed at developing a car that will be powered by wind. So there won't be a sale, don't worry, but it's just that the massive development of wind farms is at play there. So because when there is a lot of wind in Europe, there is too much electricity, so much that sometimes even the price even becomes negative on the market. So we are looking at the possibility of using this excess electricity for different processes. Water hydrolysis, hydrogen and oxygen can be mixed with natural gas, and this is something that we are experiencing right now. We're trying to use that, for example, in Dunkirk, for buses, for city buses that can be powered with this mix. Or we could use it by actually injecting it into gas distribution network in the city of Dunkirk. This is one first step. I haven't reached the vehicle yet, so you can actually take the CO2 that you want to destroy, the hydrogen, then you have a chemical synthesis which gives methane, which is natural gas. And with a European car manufacturer, we are currently looking at the possibility to develop a car that would be powered by biogas produced from water, CO2, and wind energy. So it would be a wind-powered car.